I'm Hamish, mathematical biologist and game designer, and the title of my talk is Recent Developments in Puzzle Design and Educational Software, and a Model for Convergence. 3 sections of my talk. Number 1, I'm going to look at expressive level design in video games. Then in section 2, I'm going to look at Bret Victor's Model for Educational Software, which you can kind of call an interactive essay. And because I find Bret Victor's work very, very interesting, I think it's a really great model for communicating certain things. And I also think that video games expressive level design is a great way of communicating certain things. I've done some projects that try to put these 2 things together and ideally get the best of both worlds. Okay, so first, video games, and I'm going to try and... the point of this section is that you can see some things that video games might be able to contribute to educational software. Okay, and we're first going to start with a quite old, quite cliched video game. There's a game called Catacomb Abyss, which is a game about you're a little wizard and you're walking around some sort of old abandoned ruins and you can shoot fireballs from your hands. So standard video game stuff. There's something quite interesting that happens in the first level of the game. Like I say, it's a game, you can shoot fireballs from your hand and use them to shoot. The expectation is that you'll shoot zombies, like this one on the front of the game box here. But something else that can happen in the game is that you can destroy walls, right? You can shoot a fireball at some walls, not all walls, and some of them, they will crumble apart, and you'll be able to walk through the rest of the maze or something. You'll be able to discover some secret. And that's quite an important thing to know about when you're playing the game. However, a person starting up on this game does not know that you can destroy walls with your fireballs. You know, they start up the game, they're in this area, and they look around and they try pressing buttons, and they see that they can throw fireballs, but they don't necessarily see, they don't necessarily guess that, I can destroy some walls with my fireballs. They might read the instruction manual, but then a lot of people don't read the instruction manual, which is fair enough, because reading instruction manuals is very, very boring. Okay, so the game designers sort of have a problem here. They have an interesting element of their game, which is that you can destroy walls with fireballs, but not everybody knows it, not everybody can guess it. And something that they could do here, something that most game designers would do, would be to put up a great big sign at the beginning of the game saying, you can shoot fireballs at certain walls, and there'll be treasure behind them or whatever. They could describe it to you, they could describe it to the player in the same way that I've just described it to you, but again, that would be very, very boring. That would be a great big sign at the beginning of the game, and you're saying, I bought this video game and I want to be playing with it. I don't want to be just being told what to do. So they thought of a better method. You start up the game, and you look around, you go into a certain corner, okay? This particular corner. And a zombie appears. This zombie, and you're like, oh gosh, what am I going to do? You start firing. And this is the beginning of the game, so you're not very good at shooting. You start firing mostly randomly. And note that this area is very, very enclosed. Mostly in a game when you're shooting at people, they're not so close to you, and the walls are a little bit further away, and so on. So you're firing randomly. You're in this like little cubby hole. So I mean, here's the map of the first level of the game. You're in that little cubby hole up there. So what's likely to happen is you're shooting randomly, you hit the zombie, and so you kill the zombie. Hooray! But because you've been firing randomly, you're also quite likely to accidentally hit one of the walls. And it just so happens that the walls in this little area of this first level, a lot of them are destructible. Okay? It's very probable that the player will accidentally discover that they can break down walls. But you know, in some sense it's not an accident. The designers very consciously thought, yeah, okay, we'll engineer a scenario in which the player accidentally discovers one of their abilities, and won't that be wonderful? It's also a sort of very fast way of learning things, very natural feeling way of doing things. It's active, of course, you're not just sitting there you're not just sitting there listening to someone. So it's fun, right? Something that's striking, and it's active, and you see something new and specific happen. Okay, that is sort of what fun is. And what I'm trying to say with this slide is we've had 30 years of the games industry now, and game designers have done lots and lots of, quite a lot of things. Obviously, a lot of video games are pretty silly, but every once in a while, a video game developer will come out with a new way of showing people things in a sort of virtual environment that I really, really think that educational software should seriously be taking note of. So much more fun than just being told what to do. They're entertainers, right? They're not allowed to be boring. But the next thing I want to show you, I'd like to indicate that video games have come a long way in that time. That's the game Portal, which I think is basically the best game of all time. Came out about 7 years ago. Generally, you're trying to get to the exit. You can see this doorway here. You know, that little robot there will try to stop you from reaching it. And it's usually a lot more complicated, is the thing. Those are introductory levels that are just trying to indicate the basic things. So why do I think that Portal is the best game of all time? It's not just things that you can see in that trailer, it's something that I have to tell you. So when I showed you that example from Catacomb Abyss, where you accidentally found out the thing, you were discovering a programmed behaviour. There's some line of code in the game that says, fireball destroys, wall. I mean, it's going to be more complicated than that. But in Portal, in addition to learning the fundamental rules of the game, you also learn emergent things. And probably a lot of you know what I would mean by the term emergent, but just to clarify, in mathematics we have like the rules of the game, the axioms, like A plus B equals B plus A. Right? Or A plus brackets B plus C, close brackets, equals AB plus AC. Those are axioms, but then the whole point about mathematics is you take these fundamental, well, I don't want to say the whole point of mathematics, but generally what you do in mathematics is you take these little rules and you combine them together in enormous, great big strings of things, and then you get something surprising, right? You get a theorem that you can prove. And in Portal, I'm going to give you an example of something where it does that. But there's something philosophically interesting about Portal. You need to bear in mind. It's a revolution for game developers, I think, because it said, what is a fun puzzle? What makes a puzzle fun, or an engagement with a game fun? And usually game developers would say, oh well, it's a combination of sort of tactile, sound effects and things happening fast and a little bit of complexity. And with puzzles, they want things to be hard, right? Usually a person would say, a puzzle isn't fun unless it is hard, and when you manage to do it, you get some satisfaction, because you say, oh, I managed to beat this hard thing. But Portal is not about being hard. Portal is actually about being as easy as possible. It wants to be as easy as possible while expressing interesting things to you. And its teaching style is even better. I mean, in Catacomb Abyss, we saw something that I think is pretty cool. Learning through accident, right? Engineered accidents that can teach you things. In Portal, there's something much better. Here's the example I'm going to give you of quite an interesting thing that Portal expresses to you. So in Portal, there's gravity, right? If something goes up in the air, there's a force that pulls it downwards. Whether it's a box, or whether it's a person, or whatever else, there is gravity. Portal, as you also saw, it's got this interesting thing. The whole point of the game is you've got like two doorways, and you can put them on different walls, and you go through one and you come out the other. That's the point of Portal. So it's got gravity and it's got portals, and so you put those two things together, and those are programmed behaviours of the game. But you put those two things together, and you get something that isn't really a programmed behaviour. If you play the game, you will understand what I'm about to say a little bit better, but there's a tactic in the game, which is that if I'm sitting here and I want to get to here, I might be like, oh gosh, well I can't jump that far, what am I going to do? well, what I'm going to do is combine gravity and portals, and I'm going to put a portal on the floor after this great big drop that might kill me. But if I put a portal here and here, I have my drop, and I build up some momentum. And I'm able to transfer, I'm able to appear in a new place with some momentum. This is pretty cool. It's a clever tool, and the designers of the game, they put it in the game, and they found out that it was a really hard puzzle. Yeah, very hard puzzle. Very few people would get it, and if they did get it, it might be by luck or something. They wouldn't really understand what had happened. And so the designers of the game put in a lot of infrastructure to really clarify what's going on with this move. And there's a whole series of puzzles that I put little pictures here. I mean, I don't expect you to be able to look at these in detail, but you know, there's 7 puzzles here, and they all build up this move that you're learning. And to look briefly at the first one and the last one. On the right, we've got the last puzzle, which involves a really sort of complicated fling. It's called the fling. This phenomenon is called the fling. And in this one, this isn't even a puzzle. It's nothing. You walk into this room, and there's the exit. All you have to do in order to get through this room is to just put a portal on the wall, and then walk through it. And then you just plop onto here. Okay? Very simple. It doesn't feel like a puzzle, but it introduces a structure that is built upon by future puzzles. Okay? This is really a revolutionary thing. Someone saying, oh, this is a game, every single part has to be like challenging to you, it has to be fun, it has to be a puzzle. But no, here the designers are saying, we're going to make it nice and easy for people. We're going to express things to them by starting out with this sort of trivial task, but it doesn't take too long. And in the long term, it'll really help out a lot of people in understanding it. So what I want to say is educational games are a thing that actually makes sense. In the past, educational games, in my opinion, have been really, really awful, almost without exception. All they really do is they have a bit of fun game to play, and then you go and do some learning task, right? So there's a game called Math Blaster, and it's just a game about fighting aliens, but then sometimes the aliens stop and they say, what's 5 times 9? And I'm like, oh my gosh. And it's not just a horrible waste of time, really stupid, it's also a horrendous waste of potential. Because the things that I've just been talking to you about, it should be clear that this is stuff that can be used for education really well. Educational games should be the most natural thing in the universe. But because the industry is filled with hacks... Sorry. I shouldn't be too incendiary. Whatever, okay. It's obvious that there's a lot of potential. Games also test you on certain things, right? A puzzle is something that you can't get through. You're not allowed to progress until you've worked something out. That's what you do in school. It's also what you do in a video game. If you're interested in video games, I encourage you to look up these people. I'm going to return to this slide at the end. They're all very cool. I could talk about them for ages, but obviously I won't. So there's a guy called Bret Victor, who some of you might have encountered before because he's very into Papert. And Bret Victor has made something called what I would call an interactive essay. He doesn't use the word interactive essay. So Bret Victor took an idea from Alan Kay, it seems, which was you can use interactivity to express something, like a mathematical model, right? This is something that you're all familiar with. And so what Bret Victor did was he made a sort of translation of this scientific paper on network theory. It was a paper on the small worlds phenomenon, which is something like, I am probably connected with everybody in this room by sort of like 4 people. As in, like, I have a friend who has a friend who knows someone who met you at some point in the past. Which is like an interesting mathematical thing, and there was this good paper on it. And what Victor did was that so on the left, I've got the original paper. And they've got one little diagram here. And Bret Victor was like, do you know what, this paper sucks. I mean, it's pretty well written, but as well written as you could expect. But like, it's got a lot of, in this little paragraph, there's lots of algebra, and you've got to sort of read it and like form a model in your head. And it's like, why should you have to do that? Why shouldn't the paper just show you as much as possible? So it's got some visualization. So he's got his translation, and this is on the right. He's got a bunch of pictures, which illustrate it a bit better. Yeah, I can do something like this, right? That's the action of rewiring. And he has this, it's very direct, it's a very natural method of communication. He's just sort of saying, why don't scientists use little interactive things in the same way that they do pictures? It's the most natural thing in the world to illustrate a little mathematical model. Why not? And it just so happens, Bret Victor is slightly influenced by game developers. He's a big fan of Portal and Braid and a couple of other things. Game developers also seem to be the only people who have picked him up so far. So he made this interactive essay, and then a bunch of other game developers did. Amit Patel, yes, these names. I actually don't know how to pronounce that name, so I won't try. They've created some very nice things. But okay, Bret Victor's thing is not very much like a game in another sense, which is that games have challenges. And Bret Victor's little slidey demo things, there's no challenge there, which is fine, of course. It still illustrates an idea. But something that's nice about video games is, like I said earlier, you can test people with a video game. You can say, I've got an interactive thing here, and I'm not going to let you progress, and I want you to do a specific thing with it. I want you to get from this place to the exit of the room in Portal, right? Or I want you to kill a bunch of zombies. So there's no goal, and so there's less specificity, by which I mean that Bret Victor doesn't really know. So if there was some phenomenon inside of the interactive demo that Bret Victor made, he wouldn't really have any way of knowing that you had experienced that phenomenon. While in Portal, the designers of Portal know that if you complete the game, then you have definitely experienced the fling, because they put a bunch of puzzles in there that made it so that you couldn't progress until you did the fling. Section 3, here's where I've done some projects that will try to combine them. Though this first one, I made it before I saw Bret Victor's thing, that is quite similar. So this is an interactive documentary. And some of you might know the game Asteroids. It was a very old game. Kind of interesting because I realised that you could use it to describe certain mathematical things, specifically in topology. I won't go into detail here, but it worked pretty well. What happened was you would play around with this topological thing, and I added some extra mathematical stuff, and there was a narration that happened at the same time while you were playing the game. And I got that idea from certain other games, Dear Esther and Bastion, which are just they're very entertaining games with narration. And yeah, people found it enjoyable, and they were able to interact at the same time as hearing this narration, and they understood these topological ideas a little bit better than if I had just sat them down and explained it to them. It was kind of successful. It wasn't ideal, though. Some people didn't quite get it. The second project was a little bit more like Bret Victor's thing. I decided, I was quite impressed by his translation, so I decided to do a translation of my own. This was a paper on neuroscience. I'm not going to be able to go into detail, but this paper is very interesting. It's about the way that neurons in your head respond to lines. When you look at a line, there's certain neurons that light up in your brain that we know about, and yeah, there's some interesting mathematics there. And so, for example, there's a challenge. I'm going to give a basic example. You can see that my mouse is controlling this line, maybe. I'm controlling the rotation of this line, and I can get it to light up the left neuron, I can get it to right one. I can just about get it to the place where both of them are lit up. So that challenge clarifies in the player's head that there are specific orientations of that line. And by the way, that environment there was worked on by a guy called Moira Bynum, who some of you might have heard of. It attempted to use challenges to get across these mathematical ideas. They got a bit more sophisticated than that, just lighting up a neurons thing. It used challenges, it was intended to build up a complex idea, and it was an improvement on the paper, by which I mean that there were people who were able to understand my explanation of the paper, who I very much doubt would have been able to understand the original paper. That's what we want to do, we want to make things more accessible, and some people found it fun, but my translation, it wasn't too well developed. I would have needed a little bit more artistic stuff to express things to people. But these are all giving me ideas over, for new projects. This was just a video game that I made ages ago, which I was quite proud of. And it was just a video game. It developed my puzzle and level designs, my puzzle design skills. Right? I ended up thinking a lot about these techniques, and I used some of them. I'd recommend that if you want to make an educational game, you should start by trying to make a normal game. Right? And here's the project that I'm now working on. So this is about virus structure. Viruses, as in not computer viruses. These are the things that give you, runny nose or give you HIV. Viruses are very interesting organisms, and there's a mathematical model that we have to describe the shapes of their bodies. This model was discovered in 1962, and I read the paper. It's quite a famous paper among people who study viruses, but it's a really nice mathematical model, and I read it and I was like, why has nobody visualized this before? So here's my visualization model. So you've got an icosahedron up there, and this icosahedron sort of maps to that flat thing down there. Okay? Blue thing down there, you wrap it up and you get that icosahedron, and you can change this sort of pattern downstairs that changes what is inside of the blue triangles, and by changing that you get a different pattern up here. You might recognize that as a geodesic dome. My intention with that project is to give it a narration, because it worked well with the Stranger Loop, which was the earlier game with the narration, and I'll be using some puzzle design to make people play around with it in a certain way that allows them to notice certain things that can happen inside the engine. So my closing thoughts are, if it's possible to visualize or sort of automate a mathematical model, you should do it. If you notice that it can be done, you should do it, and you should make if you can't be asked to spend too much time on the project, maybe you should just you program it and then upload a video to YouTube. Or maybe you want to be more of a game designer and use puzzle design to express things to people. And I really I think that this is a really promising avenue of human expression. There are lots of films, lots of paintings, lots of music that try to express deep mathematics, right? You go to a nice cathedral and it's like, wow, you're being impressed to some extent by the engineering possibilities, or the interesting mathematics in a piece by Bach. And so you could give people really sublime, really powerful experiences in a really natural, really fun way, using video games, and that's what I'd like everybody to do. If you're interested in these links, this link here has the articles that go into more detail on the games that I describe and the ways that they encourage you to do certain things. This is Bret Victor's website, and below is my Twitter handle. Please, I encourage, you're all sitting here and you're listening to me talk, but what you should be doing is playing video games, these video games in particular. They're very interesting, they're really fun, they are not a chore to play. They were made in order to entertain people. You should play as many of these games as you can, and that is where I will end it. Thank you very much for coming. Got time for questions?
Deeply found presentation. So, questions?
Yeah.
Lady on the yes, please.
I have more of a couple of statements.
Uh-huh.
Well, it's a question.
Okay.
In the United States, the most popular game with kids, and it's becoming more and more popular with is
Minecraft,
And I
yes.
see that you don't mention it. I know so many kids that really invest in it. And
It's a different kind of thing. It's a very, I respect Minecraft. I touch my cap very strongly to Minecraft.
well,
But it is
how
a
do you
different...
leave it out of your discussion? And that's one question.
Okay.
And I wanted to tell you that one of the more interesting living papers was done by Mitchell Resnick and Brian Silverman. And of course, they modeled it after Alan Kay's. Alan Kay modeled it first. So their paper was done, I think, Alan's was done in the late 80s, and theirs was done in the early 90s.
I would very much like to see
And
that.
I was just telling Mitchell that he ought to make it more accessible, or work on it again, or fix it up. I mean,
Yes.
it's very old. Then the next thing, the next comment is Bret Victor is one of these really creative people that likes to throw his ideas out, half-baked or not, and have other people take them up.
Like me.
Now, currently, Bret Victor is a friend of mine. He is working with or for Alan Kay, which is not a big surprise. He runs, Alan has set up a couple of research labs, and Bret is in charge of the one that's in San Francisco. And what he's doing is still a surprise, but he's one of the most inventive people I know. I can tell you, never mind. Those are not comments.
I think that there's probably an interesting essay to be written on Bret Victor's relationship with the games industry as well. But okay, for the Minecraft thing, yeah, like I say, I touch my cap to Minecraft. Creativity is important. That's what most of you are here to discuss. Encouraging creativity and giving tools for creativity, etc., etc. But scientific communication is a worthwhile thing as well. And what I might say, so one game that I've got on here is Incredipede. You can kind of see it in the middle of the right. Incredipede is an interesting game. Most of the things on here are very linear games, by which I mean that there's a puzzle, there's only one way for you to solve it. Yeah? I'll bet that a lot of you have been thinking in this direction during my talk. You can make puzzles, you can make any game with any level of freedom. Mostly what I'm interested in is linear games, because linear games let you force the expression of specific things, and the expression of specific things is important. With Incredipede, Incredipede is a game, it would be helpful if I had a picture, it's a game about designing little animals that have limbs, so they have bones and they have muscles. Okay? And you have little assault courses that you try to get through with these things. You might give your Incredipede wings, or you might give it legs, or you might give it arms that let it pick things up, or arms that might let it climb. And when you're playing this game, it's very interesting. You're realizing just how complicated animal limbs are. And you try to make something walk, and you say, oh, well, walking is the most natural thing in the world. Look at me, I'm just moving my legs. But then you play Incredipede, and you realize, oh my gosh, this is so hard. It's amazing that babies manage to learn to walk. But the thing about Incredipede is that the puzzles, there are multiple ways of solving them. Almost all of the puzzles, that's the case with. There are some exceptions that's actually quite interesting to investigate, but yeah, there's multiple ways of solving puzzles in general, and that leaves it with less specificity. And I wouldn't say that's a bad thing at all. I want diversity. However, specificity is something worth talking about as well. And in the case of this game, in the case of Catacomb Abyss, they needed specificity. They needed it to be the case that the player would know that walls can be destroyed. And there are certain things that we need children to learn as well. And surgeons, right? There are certain things that I want a surgeon to know, and if I'm going to have a surgeon be taught how to cut me up using a piece of educational software, then I can see an argument for letting that surgeon do it in whatever way they want. But there are certain things that I want to see specifically expressed to that surgeon as well. Okay. Didn't talk about Minecraft too much there, but yeah. Okay. Next question.
So